Good evening, everyone. This is a special city council meeting. It is 6 p.m. on May 16th, 2022. Let's do the pledge, and then we'll take roll.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Betty, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Leslie Notaro.
Here.
Councilmember Lloyd Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Shirley.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Zabel.
Here.
Vice Mayor Glenn Gunn.
Here.
Mayor Dave Gaddis.
Here.
City Manager Lynn Reeves.
Here.
And City Attorney Randy Mora.
Present.
And Councilmember Frank Bankert is not in attendance yet.
Thank you very much, Patty. Okay, we have one item on this agenda this evening, and immediately following this one, we will move over to the regular work session. It's item 1, to authorize the mayor and city manager to execute an agreement for professional services for city attorney. First off, do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, so that's Leslie Notaro and Lloyd Roberts. Leslie, you have the floor.
I think it's appropriate. This is what we voted on at the last work session. I don't know what it was, but yes, it's appropriate.
All right, any other comments? Okay, I had just a couple of questions just because I was just a couple of things that stood out to me. If we look at page 1 of the agreement, item 3B, I noticed that it mentions the, let's see here, Special Magistrate, Planning and Zoning, Parks and Rec, and Board of Adjustments. I believe that those are billable. Does that mean that the Citizens Advisory Committee is not billable?
The Citizens Advisory Committee, because it doesn't have the likelihood of having quasi-judicial proceedings, would be within the retainer.
Okay, great.
And I can make that explicit in the draft executed with the manager.
Excellent.
This was drafted as I was learning, I was going through your rubric on your website of your various committees and the like, so that can certainly be addressed.
All right, and let's see here. The special projects, item D, I'm assuming that our sign ordinance would be considered a special project.
In all likelihood, it would be. I'd have to evaluate what work has been done to date from your previous attorney. It's my understanding there's none. If we're starting from scratch, it likely would be. But I'm not going to make it a special matter if you're almost over the finish line and then say, oh, well, that's billable, but it's my understanding that's not real.
I got you. Okay. I don't have any more questions. Does anyone else? Mr. Gunn?
Did we go back and compare the previous city attorney's professional services agreement with this? Because, I mean, this looks like it's pretty cut and dry. Hey, we do this, we get paid this, we do that, we get paid that. When I go back and look, one thing that I've been kind of for all along was because some things got off the rails with the previous professional services agreement, we had to go back and reaffirm some things. And it goes back to, I pulled up a September of 2020 email from Fred Riley with the amended professional services agreement. And the biggest thing that I'll just bring to everybody's attention is under legal services, and if you pass this down, it specifically reiterates where the tasking for the city attorney comes from. It comes from the city council acting as a collegial body, or it comes from the city manager. And all requests basically go through that. Now, you cover it in the special projects, but the whole purpose of this amended professional services was to prevent people from going off the rails or rogue. And we saw that at one time we extended a professional courtesy and it kind of was abused. And so we went back and we specifically changed the professional services agreement to And even during the interview, you said, yeah, that's a problem. You know, I understand how that works. But I guess to prevent any future questions about that, I would like to go back and look at the previous professional services agreement, and also there's portions in there regarding public records and that stuff that I think we all take for granted. And I know your expertise is in public records and that sort of thing, but I just want to make sure that we at least review it and make sure there's nothing in there, because I think everything in that updated professional services agreement that we did with Fred Riley was written in blood, to put it frankly. I mean, from lessons learned or that sort of thing. So I just want to make sure, and I'm sure it may never come into question with this body and this city attorney, but that's not to say something will go off the rails as things change up. That's my own.
Are you saying that in the future, if we pass this tonight, you would like to modify the agreement?
Yes, I would like to go back and look at them side by side. As a minimum, I would like to see number 3, legal services, and those exact changes that we did with Fred Riley inserted into that agreement, so we know exactly who can obligate city monies when it comes to talking to the city attorney. What everybody's obligation and role is in this agreement and relationship with the city attorney.
Okay, so I remember this conversation, and I also remember the situation we were dealing with at the time, and there were cases where it was heavily abused. One of the things that Randy said to us was that he feels like any of us should be able to contact it at any time. And if he detected that there was a problem, then he would address it with the city manager and then bring it back to the council. Does that serve as the same function as what you're referring to? Or is that?
Yes, the way I see it working is, horse, then the cart. So if somebody calls up the city manager and says, hey, I've got a professional legal question dealing with council things that I'd like to talk to the city attorney about, then Rich says, fine, go ahead and do it. And it's just keeping everybody in the loop. There's no surprises when the billing comes from the city attorney and a phone call shows up based on a phone conversation between the city attorney and the individual council member. I'm not saying exclude those services. I'm just saying everything's above board. Everybody knows what's going on.
I'm a little curious, if we ran into special billing, would we be notified before that began?
I've always notified my clients when I create a special matter, and I do that few and far between in my practice. The only one that I've had a community where I have an open special matter has been in Kennett City, where they've been in back-to-back years with their transitioning managers and clerks and the like. I do it very sparingly, but I would say that question is sort of distinct from the question for Mr. Gunn. I would either disclose via email or at a meeting to you, the manager has authorized a special request of this nature, and that's almost certainly going to be a matter that we discuss, unless we're talking about a matter of urgency for some reason. You've had a sinkhole, we're trying to do all kinds of things, and it requires some urgency in response to that. But as a general matter, I usually tell my body, I've been authorized to engage in a special matter for this purpose, or I requested of you directly, hey, this Supreme Court thing happened, we've got some more of this, the pandemic has happened, we're doing this special thing. So I hope that addresses your question as a special matter. Yes, in brief, yes, I disclose them. I don't want surprises on the billing, because that's totally on me. Later on, when you're like, we didn't know Randy was off doing this, we would have curtailed it sooner. If I have one I expect to be discreet and gets much more involved, I also advise of that so that I don't end up too far down the rabbit hole. To address Mr. Gunn's concerns, Councilmember Gunn's concerns as it relates to this language, you'd expressed, as you just stated during my interview, you raised this question as a generic matter, and my response to you then is as it is now. I don't object to the language being included in the contract if that's the will of the body. I don't think it memorializes anything that's different than my ethical obligations to the council. I represent an organization, and therefore my ethical obligation is to the organization. If you want to memorialize workflow, I think it's better from a codification standpoint that it be in rules of procedure your code of ordinances or otherwise, some internal document, rather than the contract, so that you're not having that issue where you go contract to contract and keep having to memorialize, hey, by the way, the attorney works for the council and workflow goes this way. That's ordinarily something you would see either in an internal policies and procedures of the community or the rules of procedure governing the body and its use of resources. Just alongside what you guys can do with a copier and those sorts of other things, this is how you use the town's resources as officials. And so with that said, I would of course defer to the body's will and desire in that respect. I don't object to the language, as I don't see it to be inconsistent with how we deploy services. The only concern that I have is all written responses for legal services from the attorney shall be directed to the council as a whole or the manager with a copy to the clerk. I don't have issue with that. Some of my councils do. When they say, well, if I, Randy, contacted you and I wanted you to give me a script because I'm going to terminate the next manager, you know what, it's been 4 months and I want you to put it for me in text and I don't want that to everybody, then people start to get uneasy about, well, did you circumvent that process? I'm just trying to think of a off-the-wall thing. I had another scenario in another community where there was a council member who had a degenerative mental condition. It was a very sensitive issue, and you know the timing of what was written to whom and when was pretty critical. All public records, but I just think you can understand it's one thing to have a public record, it's another to make it and just start distributing it openly. And so with that said, again, I defer to what you folks think is most wise. It is your city, it is your policy, and a contract between the two of us.
Vice Mayor Goode.
Trying to codify this thing is like unobtainium. We write policies regarding public records and they're not followed anyway, depending on which way the wind's blowing and who the council member is. So what we had tried to do was make the city attorney the last step in the check process, was that if you receive a call from somebody saying, hey, I'd like to get you to draft a resolution for me to do this. Well, you're the last step in the process and say, well, have you had this conversation with the city manager or whoever? And that's what we're trying to do. So my feeling is trying to codify that may be a lot of work.
Yep, and again, I defer to how you find
If
your
nothing else,
community best.
it memorializes it for this period while you're the city attorney, and everybody understands the expectation for the code of conduct. And realistically, I think at some future date, we need to sit there and come up with a protocol and a code of conduct for how we conduct business. What comes first? Conversation and debate, then action, not action and then the conversation and debate. That's all I was trying to do.
And I think that his advice is sound about maybe we should look into writing an ordinance, adding it to our code of conduct, so to speak, on how we interact with the city attorney.
And to be clear, it wouldn't necessarily need to be an ordinance where you have a first and second reading and a publication in a newspaper. For your internal administrative functions, a resolution is perfectly appropriate. One of the nice features of a resolution is it is a single writing and a single adoption, and so if you have to amend it, perfect it, you have the opportunity to do that. If we decide in September this works and hey, we failed to catch one thing, in October we can change it again with proper notice and re-adopt. But ordinarily, internal administrative guidelines are commonly done in resolution. The challenge, my job is to issue spot for you. The challenge with resolutions is making sure your city staff, especially as you look to have some transitions, are aware of those internally codified procedures, so that you have that continuity through personnel.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Yes, I mean, at this point, I don't believe we should be putting this in the agreement, that we should vote on the agreement as is. To me, it's perfectly understandable. If I need to contact the attorney, I can't. I don't want to have to come to the council to ask permission to go to the attorney for a legal question, for example. I mean, personally, I'm not going to go up and set up a complete project and, bill till the cows come home. I just wanted to have the ability to contact the attorney for a question. I guess we're all adults, but going back to the process, yes, I believe we can't handle this process, codified, at a later date, which we should. We should go through not only this, but other matters to make sure that the council can't run off the rails.
Does anyone else have any comments? No? Okay, well, I say we take it to a vote, and let's get this done.
For the sake of clarity, the motion and second on the floor to adopt the agreement as drafted, I would consider the CAC language a Scrivener's issue that we can address afterwards. You don't need to amend to that, we can just do that before we execute.
Are you okay with that, Vice Mayor? Okay, all right, so this is to authorize mayor and city manager to execute an agreement for professional services for city attorney. The agreement is between the City of Bel Air Beach and Trash Daniel LLP for city attorney services. Patty, would you please take the roll?
Mayor, before we call roll, we should ask for public comment, if there's any public comment.
Oh, thank you very much. Any citizen comments? Nope. All right, back to council. All right, Patty, please take the roll.
Okay. And Mayor Gaddis, Councilmember Bankert is on the phone now. Just,
Mr. Baker, do you have any comments?
I don't have any comments, but I have a very, very hard time hearing you, Mr. Mayor.
that's, yeah, I mean, that's every time though.
Are we not on Zoom right now?
I'll let him. You want to call?
Oh, okay, I got you, all right. Can we answer any questions for you, Mr. Bankert?
Not on this matter. Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I hear you just fine.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
Patty, now would you please call the roll?
yes. Councilmember Bankert,
Yes.
Councilmember Notero,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Shirley,
Aye.
Councilmember Zabel,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Gunn,
Aye.
Mayor Gaddis.
Yes, and so it passes 7-0. Congratulations and welcome aboard.
Look forward to working with you.
All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?